Today's show is sponsored by ExpressVPN. My savvy fans secure their internet. Join them at expressvpn.com/yang. I feel like being a child actor breaks, X percentage of folks. Let's call it 60% or whatever the number is.
It really does mess people up, and I'm not above saying like it's probably messed me up to some degree. I do my best to have it not mess me up too much. I've seen it mess other people up way worse, for a lot of reasons, and it's part of what is actually makes me really concerned about the way that online culture is moving right now, which is just, and look, there's something really wonderful about kind of democratizing fame, but what it also does is it brings those kinds of struggles and that kind of addiction into kind of everyone's life. It worries me. It makes me feel like
we should be worried.
Yeah.
Like you have teenage kids, like, having like their entire high school class, like following them into their bedroom, like, on their smartphone or whatever. I mean, like, like that's a very intense experience that, that previous generations had not had.
You start to think of yourself differently. If you are a performance and there's no boundary there, then like it's easy to lose track of that core relationship that you have with yourself.
Welcome back, everyone, to Yang Speaks. We're here. We've got Joseph Gordon-Levitt today, which is extremely exciting. Before that, we've got some news of the day. Andrew, news of the day we need to talk about. TikTok, which you've joked about. I think you've said TikTok is when Instagram
is too intellectual for you.
Yeah.
Which sounds like I'm poking fun. But I love TikTok. I've been endlessly amused by videos on TikTok. I've been in videos. The creativity is awesome and immense. And if you don't use TikTok, it probably means that you're old. Yep. Because if you're a young person, you are all over it. It's very much the social media network of the future. And when word came out that Trump was looking to ban it, there's immediately an anti-Trump reaction to it because he's an asshole, and like he's doing it because the kids were screwing with him in his rally on TikTok, and Sarah Cooper was mocking him and like the rest of it. But there's a legitimate case to be made that TikTok having access to our kids' data is not a good idea. It's owned by a Chinese company, ByteDance, that has almost certainly some sort of relationship with the Chinese. There have been some indications that that TikTok is appropriating folks' data, and right. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter have all been banned in China essentially from the get-go. Right. And so there's a legitimate case that Chinese ownership of a social media network that's used by all of our young people is not a good idea. And it looks like Microsoft is going to buy TikTok, and then depending upon how you're feeling, to me, I tweeted that that's a win. Because if you're looking at a social media network that has tens of millions of users, you need a heavy-duty player to come take stewardship of this if it's going to grow and function well and have the right security in place and everything else. And Microsoft certainly has that heft. The danger in my mind was that Facebook or Google was going to wind up with TikTok, which I did not like. Right. But Microsoft is something of an also-ran in social media. They do own LinkedIn, which you could consider a social media network for professional purposes, but most people don't really think of LinkedIn that way. You're not like going on and sharing your kitchen videos on LinkedIn, or if you are, then you probably
people
do that.
yell at you too if you get too personal.
And you do that for a living.
Yeah.
So I think the Microsoft acquisition of TikTok is a positive resolution because it assuages any of the data ownership concerns, at least insofar as the Chinese government is attached. And then it goes into the same levels of concerns you have about major tech companies owning our data. But at least Microsoft is not Facebook just gobbling up more and more of the social media networks that exist. If anything, Facebook and Instagram should be separated. And I think at this point, Congress is kicking itself in the head, or the FTC, for allowing that acquisition to take place a while back, because that would have actually led to a much more genuine competitive landscape in social media.
And Andrew, you've talked about that a lot, about the competitive aspect of these companies. So if you don't know what TikTok is, you're probably like me. Only 9% of the country, the United States, actually uses it. But that number jumps to almost 50%, 49% when you talk about teenagers. So the kids are all doing it, essentially, and adults have not even come close to keeping up. So my question for you is, Facebook has been obliterating any sort of competition. To me, TikTok is the only realistic competitor in the social media, like up and coming new competitor in the social media space. Is it right? So it feels right to not, like, quote unquote, give this to Facebook, but is it right that our federal government's like, here you go, Microsoft, you can be a player now? What's the government's role in that? It feels like Russia a little bit, where we're like, oh, here's a company for you, you know? I guess that's an extreme example, but what are your thoughts on the government's role in handing over the one new competitor in this space?
Well, again, if you're looking at the range of technology companies that could afford the, let's call it, $50 billion acquisition of TikTok, the list is not that long.
So they have to pay for it, yeah.
And you want to find a company that is not a major player in consumer-facing social media, and Microsoft, again, depending upon how you categorize LinkedIn, qualifies.
Right.
Most people think of Microsoft as this boring, stodgy business software company, and so it doesn't have the same problems. I don't dislike it, because again, the range of realistic acquirers is pretty limited. In like there weren't many folks that could actually absorb a TikTok and have it make any sense at all.
Yeah. The other thing is, for those listening, this is legal, and there's precedent on this. Like the Committee on Foreign Investment, CFI-US, is in their right to either block mergers or encourage mergers or block various acquisitions. So this isn't, while the left hates everything Trump does, I think I agree with you. I think rational thought would say this is probably the right move to make sure that half of our teenagers aren't being spied on by the Chinese government.
And TikTok's going to continue to exist. And Instagram just released its TikTok clone, to your point about competition. Reels.
Reels.
So
I haven't tried it yet.
So in terms of consumers being able to make short form videos with fun music and the rest of it, I mean, that's not going away. I mean, TikTok, if it changes hands, like the average teenager might not even know it freaking happened.
They're not going to notice,
yeah. So all will be well, TikTokers out there. Appreciate you. Yeah, you keep using that creativity. I enjoy TikTok. I mean, it is. You can see why it's so popular and growing so quick.
Yeah, it's generally hilarious. I'm a fan too. So I want to talk about this quickly, because we're recording this on basically 6 days, but by the time you listen, it'll be well over a week since July ended, which was when the $600 expansion unemployment dried up, if you will, and canceled. And Congress has done nothing. And I'm pissed, because my thought is very simple, and I would love your thoughts, Andrew. My thought is simply that if Congress can't help us right now, like at this moment, like, when are they ever going to help us, right? Like, the world's burning, everything's on fire, like, please act, and they can't get their shit together now. Is it hopeless? Like, what are your thoughts on the Congress inaction and where we are right now?
Yeah, it's a sign of just how dysfunctional things have become, where, to me, it's pretty clear that Republicans wanted to drag this out to the end of July because they thought then Democrats would cave on whatever resolution they came to, because they thought that Democrats would not allow benefits to expire. And Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats decided not to go that direction this time. And so now they're trying to bridge a gap between $1 trillion and $3.5 trillion. It breaks my heart that families are going to miss benefits for, let's call it, 2 weeks, because even if a resolution is hammered out right now, like it's not going to be like immediate disbursement of benefits to folks. I do think we're going to see continued unemployment benefits. I do think we're going to see some kind of stimulus check to folks again. but it's disgusting and infuriating that our leaders would be playing fast and loose in brinkmanship with benefits that are keeping tens of millions of American families afloat. It's a reason why we're all so despondent and disgusted that they don't do even the obvious things. When I look at what's going on in D.C., Zach, the big date I see is August 10th, because that's when the senators were supposed to go back to their hometowns on vacation. And so, no, I mean, in theory to work in their districts. And some of them are up for re-election, so those senators would be working hard. But to me, they're going to get it done before that date because of the fact that they're not going to want to force everyone. Like that's literally how this bullshit works, is what I get so disgusted by. Is like they looked up and were like, well, we got to be in town till then anyway, so, if we drag this thing to the deadline.
Note, they did not get it done before that date.
I hope the American people speak loudly in November and vote some of these assholes out. Most of them, if they're not doing anything. Now, here's my other question: is if, let's say, you're President Yang right now, this is a negotiation, right? So there is compromise, there is tactics that both parties play. If you're president, like, what level of that do you tolerate? Like, there's certain, like, do you compromise and be like, okay, I'll take $500 because that's better than nothing, or you driving this down?
In this case, if you're the president and it's in your party's in control of the Senate, I would go in and say, look, you have to get this deal done before current benefits expire, because it's going to be extraordinarily disruptive to folks not knowing what the heck's going to happen next week or the next month's rent or any of that. And so that's on Trump and the Republicans. You could put a lot of this on them because the Democrats laid out a clear bill in May. And then if you're the Republicans and you disagreed with it, then you got to get to the table sometime between May and now and freaking get to work.
Right.
So I think that in this case, it's on the Republicans that we're at this point. And if I were president, I would say, look, like, we got to do our fucking jobs, because if you look around, like, America's falling apart. And if they can't count on us to shelve the bullshit during this time, we're all going to suffer for it. And that's what's happening, is that, like, we're all disgusted and want to have a different type of leader. You're seeing it with some of, like, the electoral results around the country too. And you can say whether like a random Democrat is to blame for the dysfunction that's emanating, from, in this case, the Senate. But people are fed up, and like that's like our system of government is just failing us. And it really does break my heart that what has historically been a source of strength for us, like being a democracy, a representative democracy and republic, now it has become so polarized and locked up and dysfunctional that they can't even do the obvious in a time of crisis.
We have no national response to the largest global crisis since World War II, right? Like what? We have no response. We have nothing.
Yeah, we're this crazy dysfunctional basket case, and the rest of the world is looking up, being like my parents, my mom left the States to go to back to Taiwan, and in Taiwan there are, like, essentially zero cases and life is perfectly normal. Like, she, like, fled the U.S. to go someplace, and there are folks I know, like, from who are in all other parts of the world, like in Europe and elsewhere. It's the same deal. Like, they're all like, okay, that sucked for a little while, but now things are back to normal. And the U.S. is just going to rage. You can see it very clearly. I talked to Andy Slavitt this past week, and he's right, where he's like, look, we know what it would take. It would take a total shutdown, like no interstate travel. Everyone just stays the fuck home. We send everyone money, and we lock this thing down for 8 weeks. We act like we acted back in March, but we do it. And he said if that was like a 70% lockdown, you go to 90% nationwide. And you do that for 8 weeks. You put us in a coma. You cash everyone out. And then you could come back and school could resume, sports could resume, like whatever you like. Religious services could resume because you would have gotten it down. And this is what other countries did. But we had this sort of weird half-ass staggered lockdown that, and, folks were non-compliant. Like that there was this, when you talk about Andy's suggestion, which I believe is right, you look up and you say, I just do not think that our government or our people even have the capacity to go into a 90% lockdown for 8 weeks. It's like we exhausted whatever capacity there was back in March. And then if you look at it now, it's just going to just continue ripping through various states and communities until there's a vaccine. And even when there's a vaccine, this vaccine's not going to have like a 90% efficacy. I mean, like it might have like a 40, 50, 60% efficacy. And so, in my mind's eye, and it's not going to have 100% compliance, like not like everyone's going to go out and get a vaccine. So if you imagine it having something like, let's call it a 60% efficacy and then 70% get it, you're looking at like 42% immunity, which may or may not even be enough to get you to herd immunity. I mean, if you're vaccinated and it works, then you'd be in better shape. So this is the world of the United States of America circa 2020, where we failed to take our medicine, we failed to take affirmative steps, and then now we're just going to be suffering through this rolling wave of sickness and dysfunction and death and shutdowns, and kids not going to school and parents wondering what the hell to do with their child care and tens of millions out of work, and Congress is going to dither. I mean, that this is the reality of where we are.
November cannot come soon enough, brother. Cannot come soon enough.
Yeah, and so some of the Humanity Forward candidates are freaking winning. I'm super excited about Donna Imam, who won her primary in Austin, Texas, and she's running against this 78-year-old incumbent who's all wrong. Marilyn Strickland won her primary in Tacoma, Olympia, and she's going to be tremendous. She's in the general now. So there is a new wave of legislator coming up. We just need a whole lot more of them in a whole lot more places, and then we can start doing things differently and better.
Yeah, it is amazing to kind of wield this influence we had from the campaign into real live candidates getting elected in their primaries.
I love it.
It's amazing. It's my hope right now, frankly.
Yeah, it's great because things are terrible, but I only feel better when I do something. And so if you're pissed off too, you want to do something, get behind a Humanity Forward candidate like Donna or Marilyn, because we can help them win. It's been invigorating for me helping people like Jermaine Johnson win on the state level. And now if we can make that happen in Congress, then we become a very, very potent political force that everyone will pay attention to. So check out the Humanity Forward candidates at movehumanityforward.com. Find one, take them under your wing, adopt them, make a donation, and you'll feel better in no time. And then you will get excited about some of these folks who are trying to do right by people. Alex Morse and Robbie Goldstein, like the list just goes on and on. It's awesome.
Yeah, that is my hope right now, which gets me excited. Real quick, I'm liking this tweet of the week thing because you tweet stuff and it's obviously 140 characters, so there's not always context, and I find them fascinating. And there was one you retweeted an article from The Hill that talked about an MSNBC producer, our favorite network, who quit. She had been there for 7 years. Her name is Ariana Picari, I think is how you say her last name. We never interacted with her much, but she left and saying, and this is like, I'm paraphrasing, but quoting her, she said our current model of cable news with the ratings-driven cable news is a cancer that stokes division, blocks diversity of thought, and amplifies fringe voices for the sake of ratings. So one, I'll say on behalf of Yank Speaks, well done, Ariana, because we agree. But thoughts on, and like quick, I feel like we do a whole episode on this, but thoughts on, we've had some beef with MSNBC, like thoughts on what you've seen there and also generally in this business after running.
It's fascinating, man. I retweeted that article and I said, look, it is not an MSNBC thing. It's a broadcast journalism and media thing where you just get addicted to ratings and advertising, and then you just do what works for your audience. You're not trying to cater to 100% of the public. And Ariana, one of the most damning critiques she had was when a producer said, like, look, we're not really news. We're like comfort for our audience. And so you don't really need to...
People want to hear what they believe.
Yeah, so you just got to give the people what they want. And then if you have that on both sides, and you wind up tearing the country apart. And that's where we are. It's an emblem of the thing that I ran on in action, where you have the market just driving everything in American life, and you have the almighty dollar sucking news coverage in particular directions, and then you have people on the other side, and the people are losing and being like, what the hell happened to the news, like what's going on? And then you have folks, and Ariana points it out, she said, look, like we just always talk about whatever Trump said, and we did that in 2016, we're doing it now because it gins up a reaction, it gets ratings,
it rates well.
and that's how we wound up at this mess, and we're still doing it. And
What?
and so you have to look at it and say, okay, I get it. You're addicted to dollars and ratings and advertising. And Zach, so I retweeted that article, and I was like, this seems pretty obvious to me. And, it got like 9,000 likes. And then a couple of media types like took issue with it. And I just got someone was like, oh, the New York Times is successfully transitioning to a subscription model. And I was like, congratulations. It's like the one biggest newspaper, talk about the 1,000 local papers that went out of business and all the journalists who used to work there. Or someone else said like, oh, but like the, podcast and long form stuff's doing really well for us. And being like, well, does that undo the ratings pressures you're under, or the death of local journalism, or the fact that coverage gets skewed in particular ways? I mean, and the folks who were talking about it were generally speaking fairly prominent types, and so I feel like they've all gotten brain damage, where they're in a field where the water level's been rising, and in order to survive, you just have to contort yourself in these positions. And so I sent a tweet that was really pretty, visceral, which was like, guys, you're journalists. Why don't you freaking call what's going on in your industry? You're all seeing hundreds of your former friends and colleagues get laid off. If a young person comes to you and says they want to be a journalist, you're like, fuck no. You're seeing major media outlets get bought by tech titans as essentially trophy properties.
Or PR plays, yeah.
I called it a highbrow indulgence, and you're looking around being like, yeah, this is okay. And then when someone points out to you, one of your own, Ariana says, look, we're getting subverted by the market, which the American public can clearly see is happening. Instead, some people react like she's like a heretic. Yeah. It's like, what the hell's the matter with you people? You're part of a shrinking industry that's getting smashed into this almost unrecognizable form. And it's subverting our democracy. It's making us all nuts. It's making us all despair. And your job is to document what's happening. And you can't document what's happening in your own fucking industry, in your own backyard. And you're all conditioned to be we're all paragons of objectivity. We could never be influenced by the market, even as you're seeing your behavior completely get subverted. Thank goodness for someone like Ariana, who just called it in an honest way and said, hey, look, I see these decisions all the time, and it's not that the people are bad. And this is my big message is the people in a corrupt, distorting system will end up adhering to that system's incentives. And you don't just throw rocks at the people. You say we need to rewire the software of that system. So if journalists feel this incredible pressure to maintain relevance and ratings and advertising dollars by inflaming their audience, you have to make it so that media organizations are not rewarded for inflaming their audience. Maybe they get rewarded for a little bit more substantive, dry, objective, boring coverage that delves into some, and this is something I really think I want to dig into this more, and we'll probably have Ariana on and some other folks to talk about this, because we're here to solve problems. We're here to fix the problems of America, and you need democracy to make that happen. And in order to have a functioning democracy, you need some form of media. And if you have, for example, local newspapers go out of business, then what suffers? Democracy, because how can you vote on what's going on in your community if there's literally no one covering what's going on in your community? Mm-hmm. And then if you want to try and solve things at a national level, and you have this set of problems, then it becomes much, much harder. So we have to try and fix what's going on with the news media if we're going to have a chance to fix some of the bigger problems. And I want to dig into this because I think it's important. And you and I lived it too. That's the other thing is we got to experience our own strange gauntlet of and we came out of it it's like obviously, thanks to the Yang Gang, thank you. Like we came through it, and our message still reached people. Which would not have been
stood
true
the test of time, which is good too, right? Like it's still relatively relevant, or very relevant, depending on how you look at it right now.
But there needs to be a different set of incentives in place if we're going to have journalism and democracy survive in this country, and that's something that I'm very committed to. It's not that dissimilar from some of the other issues we try and tackle, and some of the journalists actually came out in response to my argument and say, you're right, we need essentially like a universal basic income for news. Like you just need some form of public funding so that news organizations can, one, survive, and two, have a set of incentives that are aligned with the people instead of aligned with whatever pays the bills at that moment in time. In a time when it's going to be harder and harder for you to pay your bills, because guess what? No one wants to pay for your subscriptions anymore, and the advertising dollars just keep getting squeezed and squeezed. Certainly online, because like the digital rates just will never match what you used to get.
Well, here's what's really scary about that is the guy that started this, that came at you on Twitter, is objectively one of the good ones. That's it. So his name is Sam Stein. I love Sam Stein. He's senior writer of the Daily Beast. He's one of the first major outlets to cover us making the debate. He wrote we're about to qualify for the debate stage. One of the first pieces that came out on us. He helped us blow up when we gave away money on the debate stage. Like, he is a friend and a very good journalist. And that is the point, though. Like, when a guy like Sam is saying, hey, this isn't that big of a problem, we're evolving, to me, he's drinking the Kool-Aid. He's brainwashed. He doesn't see, and your success story proves the rule to me. Like, the New York Times can handle like having some podcasts. Like, sick, bro. Like, look at the rest of the country. And just like, we go on and on. We should go on and on a different episode, but that to me is the scary part. When the good ones are not seeing what's happening, then what? Then we're all screwed. So this needs to be solved, and I think it's a government place to somewhat get their hands involved.
Yeah, there are a lot of the biggest problems in American life today. Like, we've all been so conditioned that government cannot solve our problems, which we started this episode sort of talking about. But the impossible position we're in is that a lot of these problems require government to be involved. And in my ideal world, the government helps set up the incentives and resources. It doesn't make all the decisions, but it like sets the stage so that the incentives are better and the structures are better.
The framework, if you will. Let's turn to some happier news, man, because the interview you have with Joseph Gordon-Levitt segues into this a lot. It talks about our system, the incentives of data companies. You talk about data, you talk about art. And so I was a huge Angels in the Outfield fan. So I'm listening to this conversation, man. I was fanboying like so hard. I freaking love that movie. I could quote every freaking line. But Joseph was, what I was surprised about is that he went to Columbia in like between becoming a child actor, went to Columbia and then became an adult actor. And basically got famous again, if you will. And he's really, really smart and thoughtful. No offense to actors and that stereotype, but I wasn't expecting that level of intellectual depth. Maybe I'm a jerk for saying that, but I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, Joe and I connected late in the campaign, and he's a really smart, thoughtful, creative human being. It's really awesome. Like, he has not been misshapen, and we actually talk a little bit about the fact that it's like, man, being a child actor seems to fuck a lot of people up. Like, how'd you avoid that one? But he's a deep thinker. He also got excited about the Data Dividend Project when I first brought it to him. And he runs this massive creative community, Hit Record, that I admire a great deal. So thrilled with this conversation. Hope you enjoy it too. Joseph Gordon-Levitt on Yang Speaks. Here at Yang Speaks, we think that our data is ours. We should be sharing in its value. We should have control over it. And certainly we should know if Big Brother is peering over our shoulder. Now, in today's day and age, that's easier said than done. But one way you can make sure that your data stays safe and secure is by using a VPN. And here at Yang Speaks, we recommend ExpressVPN. It's #1 rated by Wired and others. It's like using the internet someplace else magically by hitting a button. And you can use it to feel like you're a secret agent. You can use it to access content that's only available in Europe. What the hell are they watching in Europe? Well, you can find out. So just use ExpressVPN, and my link is expressvpn.com/yang. You can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free at expressvpn.com/yang. It is my pleasure to welcome to Yang Speaks the one, the only, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, JL. Welcome.
Hey, man.
What the future Batman.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, that's great. Look at the drum set in the background too. Like, and I
There
know
it
that's not just for show. You probably bang it out on that.
This is a good way to exercise your demons. Is just hit something as hard as you can. You're not hurting anybody. Just maybe your own ears. You got to wear ear protection. And yeah, drums have been my my catharsis of choice for many years now.
Well, whatever keeps you healthy and balanced, man, because that is definitely very up there on like the positive ways to do so. They're probably like literally like a billion more destructive ways to go. So you're like this incredibly prolific creative. Your community hit record is so cool. Oh, look, I've got a prolific creative too. Just climbing.
Hey, dude.
Look at that. Joseph's another daddy. Let's see. We got this.
Hey, how's it
All
going,
right.
man?
All right. Run on off, Damer. All right. That doesn't actually happen to me. I think it's a Yang Speaks first.
Nice. I'm honored.
Oh, so I feel like you and I have a lot in common where we're both in quarantine. You're in LA, so, you know, unfortunately it's been quite shut down there. And you're a dad like me. You've got 2 young kids, right?
Yes. Yep. My 2 boys.
Yeah, me too. 2 boys. You just saw the younger come in. You have this massive creative community. You're like the sort of leader and steward of, which I think is like the coolest thing ever. And then you have all of this work yourself coming out, which I'd love to hear you talk about. So you and I were talking about how you have a labor of love that you were filming right as the pandemic hit.
Yeah, exactly. It's a show. It's going to come out next year on Apple that I'm writing and directing and acting in, and been putting it together for years. And we were finally shooting it. And yeah, just 3 weeks into production is when lockdown arrived. And we had to stop. And we're going to start up again soon. But yeah, it was really frustrating. And it took me a second to realize, though, that as frustrated as I was to have to stop shooting this show that I cared so much about, a lot of people were going through things way, way worse. And from that point on, I just was like, oh yeah, I'm really grateful to be able to stay home. A lot of people can't stay home. Like a good friend of mine, I was just talking to, you know, he works at UPS. UPS can't stop, you know, and you know, of
Essential.
course, there's all the medical workers, all the people in the food industry. I mean, just so many people that, you know, can't stay home like I can, and they're keeping the world spinning around. And I'm incredibly grateful to all of them, and just trying to stay grateful for what I have, even though like I'm sick of quarantine and I want to go out and do other things. I try to just remember, like, man, it's pretty good. It's really quite good right now to you know, my situation. I'm lucky.
I can relate 100% on both fronts, because you're cooped up, you're frustrated, but you know how fortunate you are, particularly if you have young kids running around. And at least my kids really, frankly, like are enjoying having mommy and daddy like underfoot all the time, because I'm sure when you were shooting your show, you were probably busier and out more. Would love to hear more about the show, because you've been behind so many projects over the years. And I feel like for you to put your stamp on it, where it sounds like you're directing, writing, and acting in this project, then it must be something you're really excited about.
It is, yeah. It's sort of my my chance to do a lot of the things creatively that I've always wanted to do, and it's kind of one of those dream come true projects where I'm like, oh wow, I'm really getting to do all this, and I haven't done a series in a long time. I acted in a series when I was a teenager called Third Rock.
Oh,
from
we
the Sun.
remember, man. We
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
Third Rock from the Sun.
Nice.
Like beamed into our living rooms. At least,
Yeah.
like that's what happened with me, at least. So, are you allowed to talk about this series?
Yeah, I haven't talked about it much because it's not coming out till next year. There's other things, coming out sooner. But yeah, I could talk about it. It's sort of it's a half-hour comedy drama. I always sort of like blurring the lines between the two because the stuff that's funniest to me is the real human stuff more than just like jokes or gags. It's not about me exactly, but it's not about me. It's sort of about, the character's name is Josh Corman, not Joseph Gordon. And it came from me thinking about kind of what we were just talking about, feeling really grateful for the life I have and wondering like, it didn't necessarily have to go this way. I could have just as easily ended up not successful in show business. I don't think that like, I worked hard and I think I'm good at what I do, but there's lots of people that work hard and that are good with what they do that don't succeed at show business the way that I've been lucky enough to. I feel like I'm lucky to have met a woman I love so much and gotten to start a family. A lot of people I know that are wonderful people just haven't found their person yet. And that could have just as easily happened to me. And so it just got me thinking about, wow, I'm so grateful for some of these huge things in my life, and what if my life were a little different? And I started coming up with this character who's a lot like me, grew up in the San Fernando Valley, a suburb of Los Angeles, just like me, went to Van Nuys High, just like me, is sort of artistically inclined, just like me, but his career didn't work out, and now he works as a public school teacher, and he's good at it and loves it, and being a teacher is something I've always sort of been really interested in, thought I'd be good at, and thought it was something I'd like to try, but I just haven't because I've been focused on my lucky career in show business, and he's trying to find love and just not working for him, which is I've spent many years of my life before I found my wife feeling that way, and he's just doing his best to be a good person and be happy, but it's hard. And that's really what the show is about.
No, that's so fun. So you've been working on this for a while, and then you found a partner in Apple. I feel like Apple's like the big new funder. These things, like they showed up and they're just like, all right, let's buy our way into this stuff.
Silicon Valley is basically taking over Hollywood. They've almost already taken it over entirely, and with if it's not already all done, it's almost there. The only real holdout is Disney. They're the only company left that's a Hollywood company that's not been bought up by a bigger tech company, really.
Well, this is something I'd love to talk to you about because you and I had connected earlier on our concern about how our data is getting used. And one thing that I'm seeing, that pretty much what you just expressed, is that content is essentially getting commoditized, where you have these tech companies that have much, much greater, higher levels of resources than like any of the studios. And so that they control these pipes, they have these connections to us and our devices. And then they're just trying to now absorb content and like funnel it through their platforms and devices. And so like a lot of the traditional creativity, I feel like, is coming under the tech umbrella. And you feel a little bit like these tech companies, Netflix being the most, I enjoy Netflix. But certainly there's like the sense that Netflix is like is scratching its chin, being like, like what would you enjoy? What do you desire? They have like this near limitless budget, and you actually have a movie coming out on Netflix. I think just a couple weeks from now, which I confess to being somewhat excited about. So I'm not
it's
like
gonna be great. It's a great movie. Yeah.
We can talk about that too.
I really like Netflix actually, and I really like Apple too. And to me, one of the important things to distinguish between Netflix and Apple, and then some of the other giants in the field that you're talking about that are building the pipes, like you say, is both Netflix and Apple have a direct relationship with the consumer, meaning
Yep.
like the people watching their content are their customers.
We have elected
Right.
Netflix. It's true. Like we've given them our credit card. We've been like, all right, lay it on me. Yeah. Totally.
But not, that's not the case everywhere. And like I know you're a fan of Jaron Lanier, and his thinking has informed mine a lot in this regard. But you know, a lot of the pipes that you're talking about, it's not the people using the pipes that are actually paying for the pipes. Meaning, and it's largely Google and Facebook. And look, this isn't to be, you know, be shitty towards Google and Facebook. And there's lots of amazing things that happen on Facebook or Instagram or Google or YouTube, like lots of beautiful art, lots of wonderful people that work at those places. But I do think that the model where the users aren't paying money, the users get these services for free in exchange to be spied on masse and be kind of manipulated through these incredibly powerful machine learning algorithms that are feeding into all this big data and using behaviorist techniques to, you know, quote unquote advertise people. If that's the business model, that really does make me worried. And you know, there's like Jaron talks a lot about how that could impact economies, how that could impact democracies. And I'm less an expert on those things. You've spoken really eloquently about that as well. And it's one of the things I've been such a fan of yours for. But where I feel like I have some expertise is like, I think that model, that kind of attention economy model, is really bad for the creative spirit.
Yeah,
I think it
that's
sucks
where
the
I am.
creativity out of your heart.
And I agree with you too that Netflix and Apple are sort of different animals than Facebook and Google in this regard, or YouTube. You know, if you look at it, because Netflix and Apple, we essentially pay subscription fees, and then in Apple, in Netflix's case, it's like, look, I've got millions of subscribers, I've got all this money, like I just need to keep a content pipeline going that keeps all of them happy and gets more people that want to pay me. And then YouTube is like the opposite model essentially, where it's like, hey, no one pays anything, but you're going to pay through the fact we're going to try and monetize your attention everywhere you go. And, you know, we're going to try and bombard you with ads. And if you're a creator to that point, you get paid like, you know, like a scintilla of a penny for every view. And one thing I really appreciate about you is that, so you're like up here in the entertainment ecosystem, you know, you can like,
Well, that's very kind of you.
like you're in a, no, I mean, just to this fact, it's like you have a series you're shooting for Apple, you have this movie coming out on Netflix. It's like the two giant content walled gardens that are developing, but you're also the steward of this creative community because you just want more people to be able to create. So you have this thriving group of creators on Hit Record, and then you know they're not like, you know, signing like, you know, like Apple or Netflix deals. They're putting this stuff on YouTube. And so you see how the system's not working for the up and comers who are just trying to make art and put their work out there, that like this ecosystem is really exploiting them in many ways. Like it's you know, just like trying to extract value. And then they're hoping that they can sort of make it through this narrowing gate, like the up and coming creatives. And I just had this social media discussion around musicians, which is like another thing where it like if you look at something like music, to me, I mean, the music industry I've always known has also like massive problems, but it was clear to me that if you were a successful musician or even like an up and coming musician, touring was where you were going to make your money. Like certainly if you were like someone who could sell out a venue, but even if you were, you know, a lower level musician, you could like tour and like make your bones. And so I just tweeted, I was like, I have no idea how any musician makes money right now because like, you know, it seems like most touring is off the table. And then this whole cavalcade of musicians then came into the stream being like, yeah, like none of us make anything because like the streaming royalties are pennies. I'd say the number one concern that most of us have during this pandemic is just trying to stay positive and healthy throughout. You know, a lot of the days blend in with each other. And one way you can take better care of yourself and make sure you're eating right is to join Freshly. They send you food that's pre-prepared. It's delicious. It's easy. If you don't know how to cook, it's perfect. Just order Freshly, and they send you the food. You eat it, and you feel better about yourself because it wasn't crap. That's really like you could maybe Freshly should rebrand itself not crap,
Not crapply.
because I have to say, for whatever reason, it's so easy to eat crap right now. I don't know about the rest of you. It's like you go to that kitchen, and whatever's there is just like, oh, sure. Like you just want to freaking shovel it into your mouth. So instead, you can shovel fresh cooked, healthy food into your mouth with Freshly. It makes you feel a lot better. You wake up the next day feeling great. And Freshly.com is offering our listeners $40 off for their first 2 orders at Freshly.com/Yang. That's Freshly.com/Yang. Look, invest in yourself, invest in your health. This is a no-brainer for folks who aren't exactly tearing it up in the kitchen or on the treadmill right now, which I suspect is most all of us.
So, Andrew, my apartment building has not had gas for like a year. And I'm in a war with the management company because you can't cook. And so Freshly has been a godsend because I don't have any other options that's remotely healthy. So if you're my management company and you're listening to this, screw you. And for those of you who are not, the vast majority who are not related to my management company, check out Freshly because not being physically able to cook has led me to Freshly.com. So Freshly.com/Yang, check it out.
So would love to hear about your experience with Hit Record, because I just think it was so generous of you, and it's not like something that you've worked on only for a little period of time. Like you've worked on it for, I think at this point, it's like a decade and a half old. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. I mean, really a decade old since it's been like a professional operation of sorts, but like 5 years of just hobby time before that. And in those earliest days, it started before it was a company or a website or anything. It was just this kind of turn of phrase I would say to myself, hit record, because I needed creative inspiration. And because I'd been an actor ever since I was a kid, and I went to college. I quit acting for a while to go to school. And then when I wanted to get back into acting, I couldn't get a part. No one would cast me in anything. And it was super painful to want to express myself and not be given permission to do that. And so hit record was just this little metaphor I came up with, like, I'm going to be the one to hit the record button. And it's sort of a play on the older phrase of a hit record, and sort of trying to, in my way, say something about how media is changing from a commercial object like a hit record into a creative action. Sorry, a commercial object like a hit record into a creative action.
We got you.
Like hitting record. And so that was my bit of wordplay. But again, it wasn't anything other than just my own sort of thing I'd say to myself when I wanted to be creative. And I learned how to edit videos, and I started making little short films and songs and stories and stuff. And then my brother helped me set up this little website to share some of what I was doing. And it was just, it was like 2005. So this was a little bit before it was so common to just post on YouTube or a blog or whatever. And we started our own website, and we called it hitrecord.org. And slowly but surely this community started to form on the website, because we had this little prefab message board on there, like a PHP message board. And what we found from the people that were coming to this little message board was some of them wanted to just come and check out the little things I was making. But what a lot of people wanted to do was collaborate, not just look, but make things together with me and with each other. And my brother and I at that time thought that's unique to this moment in history, that people all over the world could not only be watching the same thing, but could come together and make something together that they might not have been able to make on their own. And oftentimes new technology is used to imitate old technology. And, using the internet to watch a video in many ways is imitating television. Using the internet to read a blog is in many ways imitating a magazine or newspaper or whatever. Just like when movies first came out, they mostly imitated theater. And when the printing press first came out, they mostly imitated handwritten books. But the internet could be something more than just a place to watch and consume. And collaboration felt like, oh, that's what this is really for. And so we leaned into that, but at first in a completely informal way. It was just something my brother and I were doing as a hobby. He's a coder, and he started writing little bits of code on top of this message board to try to help this small community collaborate on little creative art projects. And it grew and it grew. And eventually my friend Jared and I started a production company and say like, hey, this is happening in this community. We could do bigger, more ambitious things where what we all make together can be a book that we publish, or it could be a TV show that gets on TV, or a record we put out, and we could figure out ways that if any of these productions make money, then the artists all share in that money, and that's what we did, and we that's what we've been doing for years, and now we're really focused on trying to really make the tech a lot better, so that it's not always me and the folks in my office leading those projects, but that anybody can come and start their own project and find their collaborators and have a collaborative, creative experience. Because ultimately what I've found is, like, going back to the origins of it, if you're looking to just express yourself, to have that creative experience where, like, I want to do something, it's hard to do it alone.
Yeah.
I find
Totally.
I find it hard to do alone, and I think a lot of people find it hard to do alone. Whereas if you can jump in on a project with other people, then you've got other people that are saying like, okay, I'll do this and you do that. And you're holding each other accountable. You're giving each other encouragement and feedback. And you it's not just, it's also less like daunting to be like, hey world, hey internet, here's me and my thing, come like me. You know, it's more like, hey, we made something together. It's just like, it helps, I think, people come out of their shell, and it's more complicated than like posting something on your own that you can do on, you know, YouTube or TikTok or Instagram or whatever. But and so it's taken us a long time, and it's still a process figuring out how to make that all work, how to help people collaborate with each other. But it's just continued to grow and grow, and more people are doing it now than ever. And it continues to be something I find deeply fulfilling. And so, yeah, I
think it's awesome. You know, the Yang Gang has like a creative strain as well. Certainly we have nothing like, you know, what you've built, but there's like a, you know, a group of like artists and designers. And one of the things that I think was true in my campaign is that there's just not enough art in the world, in part because of what you and I are describing, where like the market doesn't support enough art.
Yeah. This is something I've always wanted to ask you about, and I've been excited to ask you about it since I've gotten to know you a bit, and now's maybe a good time. Because I heard you on a podcast a while back when you were first campaigning for president, and you were talking about universal basic income, but then you were also saying, like, and you could, don't let me put words in your mouth, you could express this better than I could, but you were talking about like having other programs and structures to support kind of productivity and like community-driven collaborative efforts, whether it's in art or in other fields, that were not necessarily driven by a commercial market, but were driven by other modes of.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know, I'm so interested in how that works, because I don't know that commerce is the only way to drive art.
Yeah, thank you for calling that out. So to me, pillar number one is like put money into people's hands. Would folks have more freedom to create? Yes. Would they have more ability to reward artists and creators? Yes, if you had better structures in place. But there's like this whole set of activities that has been eroding for years and decades in the United States of America that I think most of us agree are like pretty positive stuff that the market just is not going to love. And one thing that, like, you know, I use as an example when I travel is like local newspapers. Local newspapers are getting wiped out. Like, 1,000 local papers gone. And democracy does not function as well if you don't have local papers. So let's say even if we had more money in a community, sure, some more local papers would survive, but maybe you decide that local journalism is good regardless of whether or not like the advertising makes money or, like the subscriptions. And so if you start looking at some things that maybe we can agree are positive, which I would definitely put art in this category, I'd put local journalism in this category, I'd put volunteering for a civic organization in this category. And so volunteerism is down. Like pretty much anything where like there's something that you regard as positive in the community has been declining by the numbers for years. And so there's like this whole suite of activities where I don't think any of us necessarily wants to get quote unquote paid for everything. It's like, hey, if I volunteer for the nonprofit, like nonprofit pay me. It's like there has to be like some sort of activity you do that's like non-monetary, but also something that we want to reward or reinforce. And so my idea was essentially you create like a parallel economy around this other set of activities that we could use another currency for, or time. And it was based on something called time banking, where in the 60s, RFK's speechwriter was trying to figure out how to help poor communities become more socially connected. And what they came up with was something called time banking, where if I babysit your kids, then you get me back by hauling like logs off my lawn. And we essentially just trade like units of time with each other. And so you could introduce like a different currency or time units into this other set of activities that we know we need more of, but you don't want to pay people for because it's like a little messed up. And so, and I would certainly put art in this category, where if someone produces public art, then they would get, this other currency reward, or other people get them back in various ways. It'd be a way to try and stitch together social interactions, and also you could disclose it publicly in a way that you don't money. So if I'm like, hey, I made $1,000, like I'm an asshole if I'm like waving around like my $1,000 like above my head. Right. But if I got these like 1,000 social points or whatever you call them, then you could actually broadcast it in a way that everyone finds perfectly socially acceptable. Right. And then you could even give those social points to someone else. And then they could use it for various things. So that was like the thinking around like that, like you need something non-monetary for certain activities that you want to help see more of.
Can I ask you more about how that will work? I know you haven't like fleshed it out entirely, so this is maybe just a totally hypothetical situation, but I just find that so fascinating. I want to ask you more about, like, so in the case of an artist, say, because that's obviously what's close to my heart and experience. So someone who makes some art, say they make a song, they record a song, and it's not necessarily like the kind of commercially viable song that a record label is going to invest in or something, but they have the potential to earn this sort of, whether it's like time banking or social points or whatever you call it. How there would have to be some kind of system in place that would determine how many social points that song is worth, or like how would that kind of...
So my thinking on this, and this is actually very close to the conversation I was having with the musicians online, would be that if I listen to the song, just by virtue of my listening to the song, you get like a social credit for the fact that I listened to it. It's like essentially a micropayment thing.
Got it. Okay, so everybody who listens to it, then that, right. Okay, so it does have to do with the audience that you garner for the art that you create.
Yeah.
Right. But so, because right now, the way that you can make money or get any kind of compensation for that sort of thing is, say you put your song on YouTube or your video on YouTube or whatever, and YouTube is able to, if 1 million or more people come and watch your video, then YouTube might make enough money on ads that they'll give you like a few bucks.
Well, this is the distinction you drew initially, Joseph, because I've been struggling with how the heck we would get this done on a societal level. Mm-hmm. You essentially want the world to look more like Netflix than YouTube.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Right.
It's like where we're paying, but in this case, you don't necessarily want. And I think like tier 1, which would be better, is if we all had money and we're all paying for stuff. But then tier 2 would be like, hey, I'm paying with my attention, and you can take like this attention currency and use that for various things too. Some of which could be monetary, because you want to try and get the like. Because right now people are conditioned to consume art and content for free or near free, and then you pay a subscription, and then you're like, okay, now I'm in the walled garden and I get like the cool like movie or TV show from like the Joseph Gordon-Levitt of the world. And so what you want to do is you want to create like closer to that walled garden dynamic out there, like where if you pay attention to something, then the creator is getting rewarded, and it doesn't necessitate my whipping out my credit card.
Right. Because someone has spent their time on your art. So if it were time banking, it would be that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes. And so like the time actually has value. And then if people have elected to spend their time on your art, then you actually like build up this time currency that you could trade for dollars. Like, there could be like an exchange rate essentially.
Right. So, and in order for that to happen, it would have to be kind of top down, right? Like the government would have to say, okay, the government is just like the government does with dollars. Like dollars is a top down thing. The government says, we, the United States government, are deciding that US dollars are valuable. Right. And so you're saying that like the government would have to say, we're also saying now that time is valuable, and here is a like government built structure, like institution for how we can exchange time currency.
So here's where it gets interesting, that time banking is in effect right now in hundreds of communities around the country. Like that, they're just doing it informally. They have some ledger. They like keep track of it. And there are also some apps, like there's one called Seva Exchange. They have Karma Points. There are different things where they're starting to try and monitor this. So if you were a foundation or a philanthropy or a billionaire or whatnot, and I know some of these characters, so this isn't entirely hypothetically, like, could you go in and say, hey guys, guess what? Like we're going to essentially guarantee your time currency at like a certain exchange. So if you do something for someone, you develop you get a credit, or you produce public art and people want to reward it. And then if you want, like, we've got like essentially like an exchange bank, and I'm going to monetize it to the tune of $1 million, $10 million, whatever it is. And the fun thing about this is that you could potentially create like 100 million worth of interactions or social activity with like a much smaller level of money. But you would need to essentially do it within a community the same way that communities are doing it with time banking right now. I agree with you on a macro level, you'd probably need the government lending a hand. Like if you wanted to do it like throughout the entire US economy and you were dealing with like massive numbers. But you could pilot this in a community, certainly in terms of in-person activities, and it's happening now. And then the trickier thing, which is something that I genuinely think that we need to be investing a ton of energy and resources on, is how to make it happen in the digital universe, is how to make it so that like your time is actually monetizable in a different way than advertising. Because we have to face facts that right now so much of our internet enjoyment or whatever is based on advertising. And there was a period when it seemed like, okay, this is cool. Like I've got, free Facebook, free YouTube, free this. But now it's degenerated into this form of pernicious surveillance capitalism where they're like, and among other problems, it's absolute shit for creators.
Yes. Yeah, I think it really is. And it's not just, the ads, it's what comes with the ads. Like, you mentioned the difference between like a Netflix and a YouTube. And again, I'm saying again, there's lots of great stuff on YouTube. I love YouTube. I look at YouTube all the time, and I find amazing things that I never would have been able to find anywhere else. Like, YouTube's incredible. But there is a difference between what YouTube will recommend versus what Netflix will recommend, because there's a difference between how they're monetizing the viewers. That Netflix is trying to serve viewers something that's so good and meaningful to them that they're willing to pay out of their pocket for it. Whereas YouTube is trying to serve up things that are just going to like catch your attention and keep your attention. And it doesn't have to be so profound or meaningful that you would pay money for it. It doesn't have to be that. It just has to kind of catch you enough to keep your attention. And those are two different offerings that are a result of those two different models. And I think, like, as an artist, I'm much more interested in making art, not that's just going to catch someone's attention and kind of like hook them and keep their attention. I'm interested in making stuff that's going to be really meaningful to somebody, that they're going to think about afterwards. It's going to like, they're going to remember and feel.
You create different work based upon one goal and the other.
Yes.
The other thing is that if you do succeed in catching someone's attention, even for like X minutes, and then afterwards you're like, okay, like what did I get? Like as the creator, I mean, right now, you know, in many cases it's next to nothing or nothing. And then that doesn't create like an ecosystem that enables that artist to like do something else, reinvest, you know, like pay themselves, have healthcare, like, you know, whatever, like the, you know, like whatever the basics that we'd expect anyone who's working, you know, creatively to have. If you're a parent right now, you are concerned about a lot of things where your kids' learning, education, health, environment. And one thing you can do that will make an immediate difference is join Literati. It's the leading kids book club in America. It sends you and your child 5 new and unique kids books every month. You don't have to do anything. You set and forget it. And then these books arrive, and then you open it. Your child is pumped about bedtime and story time. This was made for parents like you. If you're busy, you're tied up, and you want a subscription book club that makes it easy just to find unique and interesting books for your kids straight to your doorstep. I'm a big fan. Who would not be a big fan of freaking kids' creative books getting sent to your home? If you are a parent and you love your child, you should join Literati. If you don't, I don't know what it says about you as a parent.
You have to if you love your child.
If you don't have a child, join too. Then send it to someone with a child. Yeah, that's probably overboard. But for a limited time,
I don't have kids. Yeah, that's not for me. But my friends,
you're like, I swear by Literati.
Fully endorsed.
It does make a great gift.
Yeah, it's a good gift.
If you have friends with kids and you don't have kids. So for a limited time, go to literati.com/yang for 25% off your first 2 orders. That's the best offer available anywhere. To get it, you have to go to literati.com/yang for 25% off your first 2 orders. How do you spell Literati? If you don't know, you're not literati, but it's spelled like it sounds. Literati.com/yang. Joseph, you said something that I'm interested in, and this is somewhat personal. So, you know, so you grew up a child actor. You know, you were on our TV sets, and then it sounds like you went to college at Columbia University in the city for like, you know, a period of time. And then you said you came out, and then people weren't hiring you, maybe because they thought of you as that child actor, and there was like a difficult transition into, you know, like fully formed, like masculine actor that you are, you know, whatever it is.
Well, for Hollywood to put a gun in my hand, let's just put it bluntly.
so
sorry, that was dark.
No, not at all. No, we understand. So you strike me as like a healthy, well-adjusted, creative dad, like relationships. I feel like being a child actor breaks, you know, X percentage of folks. You know, let's call it 60% or whatever the number is. Like, you know, and I'm sure you grew up with people that went through a version of this. Like I became a public figure relatively recently, but I was already like a dad and like fairly, you know, mature. So I actually now have a better understanding as to how it messes people up. And I think you became famous in the time before social media, so good on you. You didn't have that particular. But would love to hear about your transitions that way, like going back to school. How did you find Columbia? Because I went to law school there, so I know the environment somewhat. And my wife went there undergrad. So it's like so I get some of what that school's about. But I'm curious about the transition both into college and then out of college and coming back to Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of quitting for me and wanting to go to school was getting away from the kind of attention that you get with quote unquote fame. Fame's something I've thought about a lot because I've been on TV and in movies and stuff ever since I was young, and there's undeniably something very seductive and attractive about it. I think it's pretty deep seated in our biology, and it makes sense if you're out in the wild and you're living in a tribe of animals and everyone in your tribe knows who you are and has some kind of emotional attachment to you, you're probably more likely to survive. So that's attractive. You want that. So I think we have just a basic animal attraction to that kind of attention and fame. But
to verify what you just said, I remember I was reading something where it said that if you have primates in captivity, they'll actually pay food to see pictures of higher status primates.
Wow. I have not heard that. That's incredible. I want to see that study. Jeez.
Because there was a time when you look up and you're like, oh, celebrity culture, like, not very natural. But then when you see that study, you're like, holy shit, apparently celebrity culture is like the most natural thing in the world. Of
course, it's very, very natural. But let's be honest, chimpanzees rape and murder each other all day long in the wild. There's a lot of things that are natural that we.
Oh yeah. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it is hardwired into us.
It is. It's hardwired into us, and like there's a lot of those things that are hardwired into us. That part of what like being a human is about is figuring out like how much am I going to be swayed by this primal monkey instinct to act on these urges. And there is an urge to want to be famous, and I've felt it. I'm drawn to it. It's something I probably struggle with, to be honest, like on a daily basis. How much does this matter to me? How much should it sway my decisions? And how much can I be happy without it? It sounds funny to say it's hard because it's a real privilege to have it, but
it'll mess people up quick.
It really does mess people up, and I'm not above saying like it's probably messed me up to some degree. I do my best to have it not mess me up too much. I've seen it mess other people up way worse, for a lot of reasons, and it's part of what is actually makes me really concerned about the way that online culture is moving right now, which is just, and look, there's something really wonderful about kind of democratizing fame. I think that in a way that's great. Fame, like something like that, shouldn't be limited to just Hollywood and or other like, super affluent metropolises throughout, the world. It should be like that. I should be more accessible to everybody, and the internet allows for that accessibility. But what it also does is it brings those kinds of struggles and that kind of addiction into kind of everyone's life, and especially with younger people. I really, because I was going through this when I was in junior high, not because of social media, but because I was in Angels in the Outfield. I dealt with like the kind of self-doubt and questions of like, do people really like me for me, or do they like me because I was in this movie? And how can I know if I'm really worth anything, or if it's all about these appearances, and like is there any me there at all?
And if I stop doing these appearances, like if everyone like forget about me, turn on me, etc.
Exactly. And so and that made junior high like it made it angst ridden for me. And of course junior high is angst ridden for everybody for lots of reasons, but I don't know. I when I see especially younger people experiencing some of the same kind of addiction to fame and attention that I think like people in Hollywood have experienced for generations now, it worries me. It makes me feel like
we should be worried.
Yeah.
Like you have teenage kids, like having like their entire high school class like following them into their bedroom, like on their smartphone or whatever. I mean, like like that's a very intense experience that that previous generations had not had.
You start to think of yourself differently if you are a performance. And there's no boundary there, then like the most important thing in life, I think, especially as a younger person, but it's something I still very much believe in as a, dad now. You have to have your own relationship with yourself. You have to have that space where you are you and you know who you are. And you are who you are because of your own preferences and your own feelings and your own beliefs. And if that goes away because you're constantly offered opportunities to present a performance version of yourself and get the dopamine hits that you get when people, hit the heart button and like you or retweet you or whatever, it's easy to lose track of that core relationship that you have with yourself. You got to spend time alone. You have to spend time just going deep down into yourself and ignoring what anybody says, because ultimately, as Kurt Cobain says, all we are is all alone, or all alone is all we are. Ultimately, you are the only one, and everybody else, no matter how close you get, and like I feel deeply, deeply close with like my family, but there is, no matter what, there's a difference between that relationship you have inside your own head, and it's precious, and it's a part of what makes us human, and it's losable. It's so losable if you never spend any time on it, if you spend all your time for others, presenting yourself to others.
Wow, man, that's really profound and deep and correct. I've just gotten a glimpse of it myself. I fear for what we're doing to a lot of these kids' brains and sense of self, because I certainly never felt that visible and on display when I was a kid. It's like I was a shy bookworm, and go home, close the door, and read my fantasy novel.
Yeah.
It wasn't like much.
But that's important. I did that too. You asked like, how come I'm like not addicted to drugs or in jail or something. Like, unfortunately, a certain number of kids who experience fame are. I think a lot of it is because I was encouraged and did have time to just like be by myself and read that fantasy novel and like just have that time with myself and not just be always obsessed with what do other people think of me? How can I present myself to more and more people? And what should that presentation be? And it gets convoluted so much with art too. That's the other thing I think about
that's the
a lot.
thing about art, man. And like I've experienced something like this even. So I'm trying to get universal basic income across the finish line. And one of the things that happened on the campaign trail, and you can relate to this, is that like people need a person to like pin it on. So it's like, if I want this thing to happen, then it's going to have to be me, like making the case, talking to people, saying, hey, we should really do this. And there's like this continued projection outward, that you have to do. And not to say I'm not like an artist or creative in the same way, but like there are some parallels, because like you have to continuously like project this energy out, the struggle you're describing and creativity go hand in hand, because like sometimes you like, there are creatives who are like, look, I just like my work to speak for itself, but unfortunately like just no one operates that way.
Not as much these days.
Yeah, it's like
Dude, there are a few, and I admire the hell. Like Donald Glover, for example, not on Twitter, not on Instagram. I have so much admiration for that. And
yeah, Donald. You probably know this, but they had like Donald and I are friendly, and he came out for my campaign. I visited with him in LA, and like
I didn't know that. Oh, that's cool. I admire him so much. That's great.
Oh yeah. He endorsed me, and we did like a pop-up collaboration where his people designed like this sweet gang gear. It was like this 1K theme, sort of like urban. And so we did like a pop-up shop appearance together. I was super grateful to him because he endorsed me when, it was like still, I guess it wasn't that mainstream a thing to do, but like, but when I talked to him, he was just like, yeah, I can see where things are going. And then I was like, oh, Well, fantastic. Thank you, Donald.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. It was also like part of his humanity that he's like eschewed social media and other ways to get his work out there. He just lets the work stand.
Yeah, well, and that it's such an important thing, I think, too, as an artist. And nowadays, look, again, it's wonderful that anybody can take whatever their art is, a piece of writing or a video they made or whatever, and post it and have that audience. That is a wonderful thing. But there is this other side that comes along with it, that if you're always thinking of art in terms of audience, there's a part of the creative process that you'll miss, that like all the great artists forever have all experienced, where they're just making something for themselves that no one's ever going to see because they're probably young, or they haven't had their career hasn't started yet or whatever, and they're just sitting in their room playing or writing or doing their thing, and it's a mode of self-exploration. It's not for anybody else. It's how you get in touch with that self that I was talking about a second ago. That to me is such a valuable part of what art and creativity is. And it's part of what we really try to celebrate with Hit Record, when we say, let's emphasize the process as one of our community's core values, is enjoy the process. Like doing this together with other people, we are helping each other just stay in this flow of the artistic process. And it's, yes, we want to finish something and make something and celebrate it with the rest of the community, but so much of it is just the process of like staying up all night and being like, what is the exact right way to tell the next beat of this story? And then you find it. And like when those exhilarating moments, they're not about an audience applauding for you. They're about your own success, that you figured it out, you found it.
It's about like that struggle and that exploration. And the big problem right now is like we essentially wait for the market to tell us whether something was good and valuable.
Right.
It's destroying us. Mm-hmm. Like so my run too, it's like there was a time when it was, people laughed at me or thought it was like completely marginal. And then we reached a level of mainstream success. And the thing I always think about is like, look, like I'd be the same person if I wasn't, if I hadn't gone on Joe Rogan and like hadn't caught fire and the rest of it. Like I wouldn't be like, a worse human being if my campaign had gone nowhere. If anything, I might even been a better human being like if my campaign had gone nowhere.
Yeah. And I might be a better artist. I honestly think that if I had just been making my own stuff this whole time and not had a commercial career, I mean, I think there would be ups and downs, because my commercial career has allowed me to collaborate with other incredible artists. But it has meant that I've spent time doing things that have taken me away from what might have been more kind of unique to me.
Well, that's to be like a reasonable summary of why we're tearing each other apart and getting destroyed, is that right now, like, I said this on the trail too, it's like, if you have money on one side in America and then humanity on the other, like money's winning. That's like all of our behavior, all of our systems, like our government, our medicine, our culture, like everything is just getting like sucked into like this money black hole. Yeah. And then over here you have like humanity. I'd certainly put art here. I'd put our kids' mental health. I'd put like the struggle and the process, regardless of the outcome. Like good people and losing causes. It's one reason why like now like I'm trying to help these candidates, some of whom like other national figures would be like, well, this person's chances are too low, and I'm just like, I don't really care what their chances are. Are they like a good person? Like, do I believe in them? Maybe I should start there. In part because when I came up, I think I received 0 political endorsements from any elected official, because elected officials did not want to touch like the magical Asian man who wanted to give everyone money. They had, and they had like pre-existing political relationships. So they were looking around being like, oh, I should endorse this person because I'll like get some currency. And then the coin flipped, where now I have currency because thank you, Yang Gang. But like now they're like, hundreds of thousands of people who donated to my campaign, and I've got like a bigger mailing list than, anyone except for a handful of national figures. so then all of a sudden, like then it's like, oh, like now, like Yang is like politically useful. And so like so like if you have money on one side, humanity on the other, like humanity is losing, and like we have to take it back as quickly as possible. Like the software, this machine, like so the black hole is like gathering mass. It's one of those things where like as the mass grows, like it gets more powerful, and you can see these like desperate like clawing gestures for help on the other side, where they're like, hey, like can we not like all like have our like behavior or healthcare or government or anything like determined by what the market likes and doesn't like? It's like maybe we should have post offices because we like post offices even if they don't make money. Maybe we should just like decide like on a few things. It's like, we think that's a good idea even if it like, isn't paying for itself or whatever.
Yeah, like that everybody should have medicine.
Yeah,
if they need it.
Medicine. Maybe in a pandemic it'd be a good idea if we all like, didn't have to worry about payment. And this thing is it's certainly, I think it's happening in art in its own way that's like really it's powerful, like, and it's complicated, so it's not 100% clear because, like you said, there are like positive democratizing effects, like, so like you do have folks like making beautiful things and like, making a living off of them in innovative ways. And so it's not all bad, but it's like the complicated stories are the ones that I think are like the toughest for people to see. But certainly for me right now, like I look up at like, like the death of live music and I think, is this going to be like shit terrible for musicians? Yes. Like I look at like what's going on in terms of the way artists and creatives get rewarded. And I'm like, is this going to be bad over time when there are like a handful of megacorps that we all like subscribe to and they're like feeding us our stuff. It's what I'm still trying to fight. And I have a few hopes for the future still. Few levers.
I really believe in it, man. I really agree with what you're saying, and I'm no economist, but I from what I've learned, the free market is the best foundation for an economy. But without other things that temper the free market, then it just turns into this black hole, like you're talking about.
The winner take all, the consolidation.
And just not everything in life is going to be properly incentivized by free market capitalism or purely free market capitalism. We can have a good free market capitalist economy, but also have other stuff that tempers that and builds on top of that to make sure that the other things in life that we care about that aren't so easily monetized can still be part of our life. Because otherwise, everything's just...
number one, you make everyone actually a participant or stakeholder in like, the market economy by saying, look, like I don't care who you are, like you're entitled to a certain amount. And then you have to try and build some counterweight to like this stuff, like build a counterweight that helps humanize things. Really, like we're losing our humanity progressively, and it's one reason why I appreciate and admire you so much is that you've been in environments and had like this incredible career that I feel like would have dehumanized 99.9% of humans, by the way, like genuinely, but like you still seem grounded, positive, healthy, productive, caring, empathetic. You've got, and I think one of the things that keeps you empathetic is that you do have like all of these creatives in this community that you're the leader of, and I'm in a similar boat where it's like it'll keep you real because like you see all these folks who've invested their belief in you and like their energy and they're like putting their heart and soul into this work. And then it makes you better because you're like, well, like certainly if you're going to invest that, then like the least I can do is like, do my part.
I definitely think that my time with Hit Record and all the people that make up the community has made me a better artist, and also just like a a better person that's better at connecting with other people and collaborating and figuring out how to do things together with someone who's got a different perspective than you, or who comes from somewhere else, or who has an idea that's different than yours. Opening up that process, I think, has taught me a lot. And then it's also taught me a lot, like you say, about kind of what it means to try to lead, which, when my brother and I started Hit Record, it was never really the intention, like, okay, we're going to lead this huge thing. But it sort of gradually evolved into something that's now pretty big. And certainly there are plenty of bigger things in the world, but like there's all these people, more people than I know, that care about it and care about each other. And I do feel a real responsibility to that and gratitude, because it gives me a really inspiring reason to wake up every day.
That's beautiful, man. It shows in your work. And the other thing that I know you're experiencing alongside me is like being the parent to two young boys also like stretches you as a person.
This is why I wake up every day, for sure. That's the best. Being a dad is just the best.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Well, all the best to you and your family.
Thanks,
Joe,
likewise.
And yeah, can't wait to see Project Power. It looks like a really fun movie on Netflix.
Thanks.
Every time Netflix delivers us a new good movie, it's like a gift to everyone, especially at this time. It's like, what's that? Like, there's a movie to look forward to. The TV series, which I know we have a little bit of a wait for. I think you're in another movie that's out now too. The Trial of Chicago.
There's 3
7.
this year. Yeah, Trial of Chicago 7's coming out. That's also on Netflix. Very different than Project Power. That'll take a whole other conversation for us to talk about. Very, very relevant movie.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah. Well,
congrats. Dude, so good to talk to you. I'm really, really glad. I'm just so happy to make friends with you. I got to thank Kevin again for introducing us. And I hope we get to just stay in touch, man. I love talking with you.
Thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please do subscribe to Yang Speaks and click on notifications so we can let you know every time we have a new episode.